welcome everyone to the Psychology of Technology. I've spent several years at the intersection of people and technology. I have a degree in cognitive science, which is the study of both human and artificial intelligence, and I specialized in computing and spent some time modeling neural networks. I also have a degree in media psychology, which more broadly explores how media and technology shape human behavior. So today I thought it'd be fun just to do a broad overview of some of my favorite areas of interest within this broad topic, and we'll dive in. Well, to start, if we take a step back, we're living at a pretty pivotal moment in history. For millions of years, living things have created tools to extend their natural abilities and improve survival odds. But now we're on this cusp of a new era of man and machine coming together. We're now all linked together into one very large thing, and we've animated inert objects with bits, sensors, and intelligence, and through the cloud linked them into billions of other intelligences. So if you think about it, there's trillions upon trillions of bits and neurons starting to get connected into this web. And every time we're using it, Googling, working, doom scrolling, social media, we teach it what's important to humanity. And that's because everything we do is tracked. Everything is becoming searchable. And we're now in this age of continuous updates and upgrades. Everything is iterative, most things are ephemeral. All of our objects are becoming screens and we're giving them sensors and cognition. And the screens themselves are becoming less and less important as we swap out the hardware, knowing that the information important to us will be there on the new device. Kind of think of it like states of matter. We started with solids and began liquefying them, and then we vaporized them into the cloud. And now everything can be copied and accessed. Everything is data. We have this participation culture that lots of people thought would never happen, where we get free encyclopedias, free tutorials for everything, instant access to endless facts and opinions. I mean, at this rate, we're developing new technologies faster than we can incorporate them into society, defining what we think of them and the rules of etiquette around them. So let's talk about the mind in technology. You may have heard the phrase, neurons that fire together, wire together. And what that's referring to is that while we're born with certain brain structures and pathways for sensory, perceptual, and other mental processes, they are malleable and can be changed by our environment. So we find ourselves in this very interesting tug of war between this neuroplasticity for technology, but also the evolutionary reality that our brains have not actually evolved for the modern tech world. And inevitably, new technologies face a lot of social scrutiny. So quotes like this probably don't seem too surprising. The art of letter writing is fast dying out. We think we are too busy for such old-fashioned correspondence. We fire off a multitude of rapid and short notes instead of sitting down to have a good talk. It is, unfortunately, one of the chief characteristics of modern business to always be in a hurry. In olden times, it was different. The existence of mental and nervous degeneration among a growing class of people, a brain incapable of normal working, due to the hurry and excitement of modern life with its facilities for rapid locomotion and almost instantaneous communication between remote parts of the globe. Here is a device that is everywhere. We may question the quality of its offering for our children. We may approve or deplore its entertainments and enhancements, but we are powerless to shut it out. It comes into our very homes and captures our children before our very eyes. No locks can keep this intruder out, nor can parents shift their children away from it. So it's probably not too surprising to hear quotes like that, but what may be a little more surprising is when they were written. This one about the art of letter writing was from 1871, and it was actually talking about the telegram. Similar thing here with the chief characteristics of modern business. That's also from 1884. The one about our brains degenerating is because of the train and the rapid expanse of newspapers. And the last two about this invader taking over our children is about the radio coming into people's homes. So all of it goes to show that for a long time now, people have argued that technology is this causal agent acting on humans, forcing our societal change. In 2008, this guy, Nick Carr, wrote an article in The Atlantic called, "Is Google Making Us Stupid?" And I think that's a classic example of technological determinism. So he said, over the past few years, I've had an uncomfortable sense that someone or something has been tinkering with my brain, remapping the neural circuitry, reprogramming the memory. My mind isn't going, so far as I can tell, but it's changing. I'm not thinking the way I used to think. Well, it is true, we're not thinking the way we used to think, especially with the internet. The continuous accessibility of information really impacts how we're processing it. So now research is showing that people are less concerned with remembering information itself than with remembering who knows the information and where it's stored. So studies show that people are much better at remembering where to find information, like in a file folder structure, than with remembering the information itself. In fact, unless people think the information is truly going to go away, we're really bad at recall these days. And I think overall this shift could benefit us. Offloading some of this information to the internet can reduce our cognitive demands. So we might have enhanced capacity for information processing because we have more cognitive resources available. Perhaps we'll become more efficient and creative problem solvers. And have you ever found yourself in a Wikipedia rabbit hole, continuously scrolling social media, or maybe just unable to stop Googling things even though you're not looking for anything particular? When you seek and find information on the internet, it activates a reward circuit in your brain. Our brains are evolutionarily wired to search our environment for information that'll help us survive. That's why dopamine is released anytime we're seeking information. It's supposed to motivate us to keep on searching, just like it did thousands of years ago, living out in the jungle. But here's the catch. When you're online, your brain won't find an exact reward pattern. Therefore, your brain feeds on the anticipation, and the ongoing dopamine motivates you to keep searching and searching, really struggling to find a pattern. This is a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement, and it can be more addicting than receiving the exact same information every time, because your brain is trying so hard to predict the reward, and it can become compulsive. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's the same thing as gambling and lottery games. It's the variable ratio schedule of reinforcement, and you may hear it called the Vegas effect. Your brain desperately wants to find a pattern, and it'll give you those dopamine boosts to keep you going and going. And heavy internet usage impacts our memory too. Studies show that heavy media multitaskers have reduced ability to discriminate between information and their working and long-term memories. So media multitasking, or watching TV, being on your phone, listening to something, doing all these different media experiences at once, trains us to pay more attention to irrelevant stimuli in the external environment and irrelevant information in our memory. In fact, for people who often spend time using multiple media at the same time, we find a lower density in the anterior cingulate cortex in the brain, which is an important area for sensoromotor, neurocognitive, affective, and motivational processes. We can't forget sound. We are primed for the sounds of technology, and we give them undue attention subconsciously. Again, think of the evolutionary advantage, right? You're living out in the jungle. You got to be primed to hear those sounds right away. But the brain discriminates sound latently, meaning it listens first, pays attention, and then decides if there's anything that needs to be done with that information. So anytime we hear those dings, beeps, chimes, Teams message, all of that, our brain fully responds before determining if it's a relevant stimuli or not. Well, really, I'd argue against technological determinism the way that some others have. I think Nick Carr, the Google is making a stupid guy, is correct that neuroplasticity means our brains do respond to the technological environment. But his hard conclusion that it's making us stupider needs more consideration. I don't want to conflate stupid with thinking differently. If we can use technology to think in a different way, that's opening up new future possibilities. I think it'd be kind of old-fashioned to expect us to think the same way with new innovations. And that's what really brings us to this idea of mind and technology. Technology extends our cognitive processes beyond the embodied cognition of our ancestors. So our brains no longer just extend to our physical bodies, but to the technologies that we wear and carry with us every day. It offers new ways for collaboration and engagement with global knowledge bases of information and interactive opportunities. It's a shift in how we see ourselves and the nature of our cognitive processes. So let's go social for a minute. The creation and sharing of information ideas through social media has become a primary form of communication and information exchange. And we see all these new technologies and these, quote, digital natives who have grown up using the internet, computers, and mobile devices, and it's totally transforming the ways that we learn, communicate, and socialize in the world. And smartphones and the immediacy of contact with our social network makes us unable to function well without that mobile connection, because it's really become an extension of self. Our autonomy is tied to that access. And that means that our smartphones and other devices are becoming part of our identities. You know, whether you're promoting yourself, posting, texting, liking, it's hard to distinguish between ourself and the device. Phones truly have become part of our identity. There's many interesting studies too where you see teachers who take away a kid's smartphone and the kid totally has a meltdown, becomes violently ill, or a parent grounds the child and takes away the phone and the child becomes violently ill. That's because it's not just a toy or a device, it's truly a part of who they are, and it's a really fascinating area to study. But we can't blame it all on, quote, the kids. Electronic messaging has become the medium of choice for business and personal communication too. I mean, here we are on Teams, and the greater convenience and extended information access keeps us always on. So it's in every part of our lives, right? There's no disconnect between our public and private lives. I say as I'm giving a professional presentation with a doxy munching on a bone behind me. Users have a technological intimacy with many devices, carrying and using them wherever they go, and the traditional hierarchical structures have flattened. You know, we expect to interact with all these institutions in different ways, the ability to send and receive messages instantaneously beyond all these groups of people. So it's really changing the way that we think and work together and socialize. And we are human, and we're more likely to attribute our behavior to external factors, but think that other people act that way because that's just who they are. And in the same way, wouldn't you know it, almost everyone says that they're less likely to be influenced by media and technology than other people. In fact, people say they're a little less influenced than their friends and family, but way less influenced than strangers they don't know. And that's pretty par for the course, right? Everyone thinks they're less susceptible to this influence than the other people around them. So let's talk a little bit more about social media and why it's so popular. Well, to start, the human brain evolved for social complexity. To survive, we had to work collaboratively to deal with threats. It took many individuals working together to survive, and today it's just as important to establish social groups and maintain close relations. In fact, when our brains are not otherwise engaged, there's a default system of brain activation that matches the processes of social cognition. So when we're at rest, we are inherently social. We only see this activity change during cognitively effortful tasks. So you can really say our brains are hardwired for human social connection. Studies show that people can neurocognitively handle a social network of about 150 people. Even online, where people can have hundreds of friends, they can only maintain about 150 true connections. And the amygdala is an important part of the social brain that supports emotions and motivation, among other things. And neuroimaging shows that social media users with larger online networks tend to have larger amygdala than users with smaller social networks. Hence, neuroscientists can now significantly predict how many Facebook friends you have based on the gray matter volume in your amygdala. In additional research, we found that the pattern of Facebook likes significantly predicts your personality traits with more accuracy than your close friends can predict. And part of this is because Facebook is designed for self-disclosure, or that what's on your mind, what are you thinking today? And it's meeting our evolutionary need to self-disclose our experiences, again, activating that reward network. Remember earlier we talked about variable ratio reinforcement. That applies to social media. With its unpredictable cadence of likes, friend requests, comments, status updates, it's all a constant state of anticipation. And Facebook likes reinforce our nucleus accumbens, and our default mode is inclined towards these social processes. And it takes a lot of executive control in order to inhibit those automatic impulses. Because being liked, getting comments, getting tagged activates that reward circuit. We spend more time and energy, again, not finding the true pattern, but waiting for that next like. And social media gives people closer senses of intimacy, even with celebrities or other people they don't actually know offline. Our brains have a hard time differentiating between those we know from our day-to-day and face-to-face lives and those known only via media. So we start to feel like we really know these other people, whether they're influencers or celebrities. Think about the people we work with. A lot of us who are on the same team have never actually met each other face-to-face, but we do feel like we know each other. Now, there's tons of studies out there over how social media influences mental health, and unfortunately, there's not an easy answer here. Really, what it comes down to is that the relationship between social media use and psychological functioning is not simple. It depends more on how you're using it, the way it's being used. And, we could spend an entire hour just diving into that topic. But I also want you to keep in mind that the problems that we put on social media, depression, bullying, social comparisons, false models, all of these things, they're not new problems of the age of technology. It's just a new way of experiencing it. But a couple months back, the Wall Street Journal published a series of reports on Facebook, including a story that revealed research showing the harmful effects of Instagram on childhood mental health. So what did that Wall Street Journal report and the subsequent research released by Facebook really mean? Well, I'll give you my perspective. For starters, part of Facebook's argument seemed to be redefining their stated objectives. They dialed back the significance of their findings, and they hinted that maybe their methodology and sample sizes weren't big enough to be making those sorts of statements anyway. So my takeaway is, looking at the way Facebook annotated the released slide decks, I have little confidence in the methodology or the validity of their internal research. If they can redline and strip it apart this much, calling their own work misleading, full of typographical errors, lack of connection between data presented and key points in the headers of slides, or saying that the causal language in the writing is myopic, that's the scarier part. They already released this study internally 2 years ago, presented it to all their teams, and now they're trying to say, oh, it wasn't that good anyway. Facebook argues that these annotations more reflect that their internal teams would be familiar with the context, but that's really silly. People who understand scientific and research methodology would balk at how the slides were presented and the statements made based on the research conducted. If anything, those slides would have been updated long ago. So the bottom line is that Facebook's internal research and the way it was presented had some scientific limitations. The way the media presented it was also lacking and poorly contextualized the research, but did make it flashy and viral. In fact, that led to Facebook's global head of security appearing before the US Congress in a hearing examining the impacts of the company's products on children. So this hearing was after the Wall Street Journal report came out, and Congress was saying this research is a bombshell. It's powerful, gripping, riveting evidence that Facebook knows the harmful effects of its site on children, and it's concealed these facts and findings. Well, federal lawmakers love to go after social media. In fact, it's a longstanding trend that one of the few truly bipartisan movements we see, with Democrats and Republicans working well together, is making a big fuss over social media in the name of protecting the kids. Where I think this gets out of hand is thinking about who they're talking to and what they're expecting to get out of these sessions. I mean, we saw that Facebook's vice president of privacy and public policy was testifying before Congress, and instead he got grilled on the topics around Instagram and teenager body image, even though that's not his area of expertise. He's data, privacy, public policy, technology. He was not the right person to be grilling, and it shows just how much our federal lawmakers love to take on this topic. But I'll admit, it is a big topic, it's important, and it does get scarier. Fake news. I mean, fake news is not a new problem. Even the printing press did this. But modern technology has given new, easier, and more compelling ways of spreading bad information. People post and repost rumors and fake news stories without checking facts first. And social media networks make it easy to digitally spread content that's untrue, out of context, manipulative, or deceptive. I mean, today, lots of cyber propaganda is not, or quote, hacking, is not even hacking into databases and machines. Lots of propaganda is spread through easily accessible public channels. In fact, even ISIS has used social networks to convince people that they are just like you. Their YouTube campaigns have shown potential Western recruits image of ISIS fighters protecting civilians, giving candy to children, and other warm, fuzzy settings. Scarily, if you do a true comparison, it's very similar to the techniques that celebrities like Taylor Swift are using to engage their fan bases on social media. So bringing this back to Facebook, we also saw recently that a former Facebook product manager testified to Congress that she does not believe Facebook, as currently structured, has the capability to stop vaccine misinformation. She added that Facebook could only contain about 10 to 20% of the content. And that's really scary when you think about all the things that are out there and why this is so impactful on people. It's a real problem. Everyday people and bots have used fake news to influence emotions and opinions of people. It's easy to spread as people crave content that reflects their existing personal ideology and points of view. We form these echo chambers, filter bubbles, reinforcing spirals, all these names that even algorithms are feeding us more of the same viewpoint, knowing that we'll engage with it more. I mean, our brains are hardwired for story. It's an evolutionary advantage that's gone too far. But that's why conspiracy theories and bad information can stick. If it tells a compelling story, our brain is more likely to accept it as true without really breaking down its facts and arguments. But let's switch gears for a moment to the social justice sides of things and all the good stuff that's come from these social movements and how media and technology help. The speed and flow of information online has enabled information to be transferred on a mass global scale, galvanizing a lot of social movements. Let's think about last year. Someone walking down the street pulled out their phone and recorded a horrific event that reverberated around the world. We had never seen such a synchronous global response and outrage. The event was reported by all news media and almost single-handedly energized the Black Lives Matter movement. That bystander video created an intense emotional reaction in viewers and became an exemplar of a social issue. And technology was at every step. Initial video recording and sharing, coordinating protest marches, enlisting followers, raising funds, and educating people about social and racial issues. Every person added and unpacked their own personal meanings and reshared accordingly. Another movement that gained steam in the past year is Stop Asian Hate. And since COVID began, Asian Americans have faced racist violence at a much higher rate. New York City alone saw hate crimes grow 19 times, or 1,900%. And earlier this year, we started to see more online videos of these assaults against Asian Americans throughout all of our major US cities. But what we didn't see was corresponding news media coverage of the incidents. So what happened was, because it wasn't being covered in the media, we saw more bystander videos, more security camera footage being shared by individual people on their own social media channels to get it out there. For a while, we've heard the term slacktivism thrown out as a criticism of people who only participate in social activism online. However, research shows that public pro-social media sharing also makes people more likely to help and advocate offline. And today, many movements that begin online spill over into in-person advocacy and pro-social behavior. Furthermore, this idea of an online and offline world is more antiquated. They're really starting to blend together. Beyond traditional news media, eyewitness social media creates a new level of exposure that previous media news coverage could not. And social media has intensified our ability to witness others' pain from afar. You can think about the Parkland school shooting. That was the first time that we saw real-time online video footage of a school shooting as it was happening from the viewpoints of those affected. And many of the students who survived this mass shooting became very adept at using social media, and Twitter in particular, and consistently tweeted stories, memes, video clips, and really found a way to take control of the narrative and keep this particular public school shooting being talked about in the news and online everywhere for weeks and weeks, way past when most events would have faded from the headlines. One of our other top headlines this year was Free Britney, and it cast a larger light on decades of issues with conservatorships in the US. And it really demonstrated that people can use social media tools to amplify a message to a mass audience. It started in 2019 just with a fan podcast episode where people were wondering, hey, what's going on here? And these messages with the Free Britney hashtag started to trend on social media, and eventually major news outlets took a hold of it. And we saw a lot of that play out this year. And after Britney was released just about a month ago from this conservatorship, she said, "My voice was muted and threatened for so long, And because of you guys and the awareness and delivering that news to the public, you saved my life 100%. But not all movements for social change have reached the same level of traction. Consider Not Invisible. Native American women have been targeted with high rates of violence, murder, rape, and disappearance for centuries. We still see today that media coverage of white females experiencing these acts are covered extensively online and in the media, while the much higher rate of Native American incidents goes mostly unreported. What this means is while technology has amplified our ability for social change and some ways have taken off, there's still more work to be done. Well, it wouldn't be a presentation in 2021 without talking about COVID, so let's dive into it. Going into last year, we already knew technology was shaping, enhancing, and infiltrating human minds and behavior. Then in March 2020, we accelerated a trend that may have taken a decade and did it instantly. Overnight, we worked online, went to school online, consulted with our healthcare providers online, and more. We saw media technology heavily shape and affect the way the pandemic was handled. We also saw that the pandemic shaped how we used media technologies. But, in many ways, although COVID disrupted human life, it accelerated rather than disrupted technology trends that may have just taken a decade to happen otherwise. And although now worldwide, more people have smartphones than indoor plumbing, COVID exposed that the digital divide is still very real and affects many American communities. It'll be important to solve for these inequities today in access to screens and the internet as they become foundational to success in society. There's also telehealth. During COVID-19, more than 17 million Americans tried telehealth for the first time and liked it. 88% said they would use it again. And during COVID-19, our community pharmacists have told us that things are going to look different for them going forward. They're going to expand their telehealth practice. They're going to put their patients on MedSync so their medications are always ready on the same day. They'll have more curbside pickup or delivery services. They'll spend more of their time with their online presence and social media advertising. And we really see that consumers still want to support their local businesses, but they expect to interact with them online. Technology also made staying at home less isolating. People caught up on Zoom, bought groceries and other essentials online and had them delivered to their door. Contact-free point of sale became really important. And we saw advertisers change their messaging and reiterate the need to stay home, wear a mask, and support the local economy. For decades, people have predicted that video conference technology would disrupt work commutes and social gatherings. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic forced a dramatic increase in the number of video conference meetings, and Zoom became the leading software because it was free, robust, easy to use. And while it's been an essential tool for productivity, learning, and social interaction, something about being on video conference all day is particularly exhausting, and the term Zoom fatigue caught on quickly. Well, there's a few reasons for Zoom fatigue. First is the excessive amount of close-up eye gaze. If you're in an in-person meeting sitting around a table, you are not looking each other in the eye the same amount that you do when you're on the computer screen. There's also an increased cognitive load for verbal and nonverbal cues. Again, if you're all together in the same physical room, you're saying a lot through your body language and you're reading a lot from other people's body language. But now you're spending more of your energy trying to communicate what your body language out to others and trying to decipher theirs without the complete picture. And furthermore, there's this constant self-evaluation from staring at a video of your own face. Imagine again in an in-person meeting if someone hung a mirror next to you and you had to stare at your own face the entire meeting. It would be distressing. And finally, the constraints on physical mobility. So even though we're home, when you're on video, you're stuck in the same place and you feel kind of tethered there. It's harder to get up, use the bathroom, go get that cup of coffee. You feel like you're stuck in that one spot. And all these factors contribute to Zoom fatigue. All right, well, we've done a very broad overview of the psychology of technology, and I have just a few closing remarks to tie it together and talk about where this could go next. There's this idea that the medium is the message, and that message is the change of scale, pace, or pattern that the technology puts into our human society. The medium can restructure our society, which is quite evident when we look at how technologies have changed our interpersonal communication, learning, advertising, entertainment, and work. They change us as humans too. Well, let's do a quick recap of the major technologies that have affected our world. Gutenberg invented the printing press in 1440, changing the rate at which material could be printed and disseminated. Mass media in the forms of newspapers, magazines, and periodicals became prominent in the 1700s. In the mid-1800s, the telegraph changed our ability to communicate long distances almost synchronously. This was soon followed by the telephone, then came radio, followed by film and television, email, cell phones, personal computers, the internet, and then, of course, the first webcam, which came out in 1994 as a way for a group of people in a lab to keep an eye on the coffee pot to know when the coffee was ready. So what's next? Ultimately, human and machines will need to work together and become more and more interdependent. Should we worry about AI overtaking us? Probably not. The vast majority of AI is so specialized, and a lot of it does stuff we don't do or don't want to do. Now, 200 years ago, 70% of Americans lived on a farm. Today, all but 1% of that work is machine automation. Similarly, by 2100, 70% of our jobs today will probably be taken by AI. I mean, I'm talking doctor, translator, editor, lawyer, architect, reporter, programmer. You'll get paid based on how well you work with robots, and we'll need to find jobs we never imagined needing to be done. That will help us become more human. We'll all have robots, but who can use their robots best? And that'll be the new form of entrepreneurship. I mean, AI has the potential to completely rewire the way society lives and works. Some imagine that artificial intelligence will help societies thrive, and in this way, AI is already beginning to advance solutions in areas like healthcare, agriculture, education, and transportation. And as we look to a future powered by a partnership between man and machine, we're going to have to really think through the ethics and logistics of how this works. I mean, sometimes it does feel like computers are becoming smarter than us, and we're still figuring out how to work well together. Because AI combines all human intelligence, I mean, everything we've ever learned, it's hard to define what it really is. Is it memory? Is it a collective agreement on what is what? A lot of people think AI will be more like Amazon Web Services or electricity. You plug into the grid and get AI like electricity. Just like previous entrepreneurs made devices that run on electricity rather than electricity itself, it'll be the same. You make new devices that plug into existing AI. I mean, big data and AI is everywhere now. Welfare, credit scores, mortgages, teacher evaluation, social media, facial recognition, predictive policing, sentencing, employee hiring, evaluations. But these technologies get posed as objective, scientific, and progressive, although they often reinforce a lot of inequalities and stereotypes and racist bias, because at the end of the day, it's still people creating it and running it. So psychology is like a predecessor to big data. We're trying to understand and predict behavior. So as we think about Google search results and facial recognition, algorithmic redlining in mortgages, insurance pricing, hiring, pre-screening, predictive policing, and sentencing, we have to think about what biases are being built into these tools from the start. Well, in conclusion, technology is all about extension and connection. It allows us to extend ourselves and what it means to be human. Terms like cyberspace, online or offline, animate or inanimate object will become dated and irrelevant as technology becomes like a presence, always around us like air or electricity. Some might say we're on the brink of becoming cyborgs, like these seamless man-machine systems. And as the human brain gets closer to accepting technology as a partner, we'll continue operating beyond our biological limits and view computers as an extension of our brains and thinking. So expect some identity crisis. I mean, with technology moving at an ever-accelerating pace, our self-identities will endlessly evolve. In a world with everything at our fingertips, our personal identity actually becomes more important because everything is personalized. My AI will filter what I like, what my friends like, and what I want to force myself to like. Our choices become more and more personalized, but if everything is personalized, then we have to really know who we are. The filters watch us, anticipating what we want. So technology becomes this mirror to help us better understand our own choices, behaviors, and who we are as a person. And to solve new problems, we'll have to learn to trust AI as a partner. We'll need to reevaluate our roles, beliefs, goals, and identity. We'll let go of what we thought made us uniquely human. I mean, computers have been writing music since the 1950s. They've been beating us at chess. They fly our planes now, discover new mathematic laws. It's a changed world. So we're going to put ourselves in this perpetual discomfort. But I don't think we can expand ourselves or our society without stretching our boundaries and accepting technology. And that brings us to the end of psychology and technology. I did not put together a reference slide because there would have been a couple hundred entries, but if any of these topics are of interest to you, I'm happy to share resources, further readings, or some studies on an area of interest. Or if you're interested in just an easy read airplane style book, I have some of those too. So thank you for your time today. And that is all.